Hi, I'm
Miles and Reid.
This is Crash Course World History, and today we're going to talk about one of our most requested topics ever. The Vikings.
And their decline.
Mr. Green, finally we get to talk about Thor and Mjolnir. This is one of my areas of expertise. I've read all the comics, like both Thor and the Avengers.
So here's a crazy thing that happens in the next 20 years, me from the past. The Avengers and Thor become, not nerdy. Like right now, me from the past, in 1994, you are suffering mightily for your love of Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. But in the future, loving Mjolnir is, cool.
Crazy John from the past, but now, in the most recent movie, Thor lost his hammer, and so loving his hammer is no longer cool.
Before we talk about what happened to the Vikings, we need to look at who they were during their prime. Like most historical groups, the popular image of the Vikings is misleading, except for the models.
The Vikings were a group of seafaring Scandinavians who existed from roughly the late 8th century to the early 11th century. The Vikings developed a reputation for their raids on other civilians and a reputation for beating their kids. Oh, oops, no, that's a different Viking, my bad. However, the Vikings were much more than the stereotype they had set for themselves, and violent savages with no regard for higher education or culture. In fact, many of the Vikings' expeditions were for trade and exploration. Early Vikings typically set sail from Scandinavia and returned home after their raids. Over time, their exploration led to the spread of Vikings across 3 different continents.
Exploration was key to the Viking way of life, with the Vikings spreading from their homeland of Scandinavia across Europe and even North Africa. There's even evidence that they made it as far as Baghdad, most likely trading with the Islamic Empire. However, perhaps the greatest accomplishment of the Viking exploration is one that they are often not even credited with, the discovery of North America. While Christopher Columbus is usually given credit for this discovery, he is in fact a fraud. In truth, the Vikings, led by their great leader Leif Erikson, developed settlements in what is now modern-day Newfoundland, Canada, over 500 years before Christopher Columbus stumbled upon the West Indies.
But at least Leif Erikson Day is more important than Christopher Columbus Day, right? Actually, me from the past, Leif Erikson Day, which occurs on October 9th each year, is less widely celebrated than Columbus Day. Only a select few people who are dedicated to the truth of who actually discovered America observe the holiday.
What a shame. Anyway, the Vikings weren't just explorers, they also had a rich culture.
Do we get to talk about Thor now?
Well, yes and no. While most Vikings at the beginning of the Viking Age were pagan, their constant exploration exposed them to Christian practices, which often blended with their pagan beliefs. The pagan religion was a polytheistic religion based on the belief in 2 competing immortal races of gods and giants. Thor, Loki, and other well-known figures were mainly good gods who were in constant conflict with the evil giants.
As Vikings interacted with Christianity, they felt heavier and heavier pressure to convert because of their close proximity to Christians, in order to improve trade relations with Christians, and because of intermarriage. Because of the polytheistic nature of their religion, the addition of a Christian god was not difficult for the Vikings to accept.
Finally, examples of Nordic language were spread by the Vikings throughout Europe and especially in England. There are numerous words in the English language that are derived from Nordic phrases, but perhaps most notably the word Thursday is derived from Thor's day. Oh, look, it's time for the open letter.
But first, let's see what's in the secret compartment today. Wow, it's a historical inaccurate representation of a Viking helmet. Vikings didn't actually have horns on their helmets. This is just a common misconception. In fact, there are a lot of common misconceptions about the Vikings, and most of them come from you, the Icelandic sagas. Why did you have to display Vikings so inaccurately? I mean, we know that you were written centuries after the Vikings, and simply for entertainment, but for a long time, people didn't realize that. Couldn't you have added some sort of disclaimer or something? That would have cleared up a lot of things about the Vikings a lot sooner.
For example, let's look at Egil's saga. Historians think that it may not be based on a true story because of the fact that the main character composes a poem at the age of 3, and later has spells cast on him, among other unlikely occurrences. However, this story has been passed down into the realms of accepted history, evidenced by the protagonist, Egil Skallagrímsson, being named most tough Viking warrior in history. But then again, you did give us a lot of accurate information about Viking culture and history, and without you, the Vikings probably wouldn't be the cultural phenomenon that they are today, so thanks, I guess? Best wishes, Miles and Reid.
Oh, there are no Vikings today, so where did they go? Well, the Vikings didn't actually go anywhere. There are still people living in Scandinavia who are descended from the Vikings. However, the world stopped thinking of them as Vikings. This is because the word Viking comes from the Old Norse word Vikingur. Let me remind you that mispronouncing words is my thing. The word is a synonym to pirate, so the Vikings didn't die off or get conquered. They just weren't called Vikings anymore because they weren't raiding anymore.
The first reason that the raid stopped was because of the shifts in Viking structure of Viking society. It became less egalitarian. The rich became richer and the poor became poorer. In the new system, the rich had more to lose from raiding, and the poor couldn't afford to buy a ship and pay for people to work the farms when they were gone. Before, when everyone is in a more of a middle class, they both had the resources to organize an expedition and also had a lot to gain from one.
Another reason why the Vikings stopped raiding is that European territories merged into larger, more powerful countries, and they also prepared for attacks from the sea by building towers or moving monasteries away from the coast. However, even today, no defense is strong enough to stop Case Keenum.
Finally, Vikings started becoming Christians, and thus burning monasteries and killing Christians came to be frowned upon. These factors resulted in the accepted end of the Viking Age occurring at the Battle of Stamford Bridge.
Oh, you mean when Hazard won the Premier League for Chelsea?
No, it was before that. In 1066, Harald Hardrada led a Viking army into England in an effort to claim the English crown, but he was killed at Stamford Bridge. This was the last major Viking incursion into Europe.
Well, that's all, folks, and as they say in my hometown, don't forget to be awesome.